She was a personal slave until the human freed her and made her his wife. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Kate Winters had never known a life outside of servitude. From the moment she was taken as a child, her life was bound to the whims of her masters, her days spent in the shadows, performing tasks no one else wanted to do. Her world was small, confined to the estate where she worked tirelessly, never questioning the chains that bound her. She had no concept of freedom, no knowledge of the world beyond the gates that surrounded her prison. To her, the idea of being more than a servant was as foreign as the idea of flying. Yet, despite the hardship, Kate was strong. Her spirit, though tempered by years of harsh treatment, was not entirely broken. She had learned to keep her head down, to endure. There were moments, however, when she would wonder, in the deepest recesses of her heart, if there could be something else, something more. Her life, though dictated by duty, was a quiet rebellion against the hopelessness that sought to drown her. Still, she never dared to dream of escape. That was, until the day she met him. Ethan Graves was a man of quiet power. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was different from the other men who came and went from the estate. Ethan was not there to impose his will, not there to add to the misery. Instead, he saw something in Kate that no one else had ever noticed, a person, not a possession. When their paths crossed, it was not through any grand design. There was no immediate connection, no sign that anything would change. But there was something in the way he looked at her, something in the way he treated her with a respect she had never known. It was the smallest gesture, a word of kindness. A glance that didn't see her as less. Ethan didn't know the full extent of Kate's story, nor did he need to. He only knew that he couldn't leave her behind, not in that place, not in that life. Kate didn't trust him at first. She had no reason to. For all she knew, he was just another man offering empty promises. But Ethan's actions spoke louder than words, and over time, Kate began to see that he was different. He was someone who didn't just want to help her, he wanted to free her. And for the first time, Kate allowed herself to believe that freedom might be possible. But freedom, as she would soon learn, came at a cost. It wasn't just about escaping her physical chains, it was about learning to live without them. The transition was not easy. Every step Kate took towards a life she never thought she could have was filled with doubt. Could she trust Ethan? Could she even trust herself to live a different life? These questions plagued her as she took her first steps into a world that was completely unfamiliar. But with Ethan's guidance, she began to see that she had more choices than she had ever imagined. Kate had no idea where this new life would lead, but for the first time, she felt the stirring of something more than hope, she felt the possibility of a future, of a life beyond the walls she had always known. I should have known. Freedom, the kind I had only dreamed of, was not an easy gift. At first, I thought that with the chains gone, my life would suddenly become clear, smooth, simple, free. But nothing in life works that way, especially not for someone like me. I had been a slave for so long, taught to obey without question, that when Ethan gave me my freedom, I felt more lost than ever. There were moments when I would wake up in the middle of the night, unsure of where I was or what I was supposed to do next. I had been conditioned to exist in a narrow world, and now that world had expanded, but I was not sure how to navigate it. Ethan, of course, didn't give up on me. He was patient, always encouraging, but I couldn't help but feel like a burden. How could I, a former slave, fit into a world where I had no place? How could I trust a man who had offered me everything I had never dared to imagine? Slowly, I started to adjust. Ethan didn't rush me, he didn't expect me to change overnight. Every day was a small victory. He taught me how to make decisions for myself, how to speak without fear, how to be human again. And that was the hardest part, learning how to be human. I had spent so long believing that my only value was in serving others, in doing what I was told, that the idea of being more than that felt foreign. But little by little, I began to see myself differently. I had a voice. I had choices. I had the power to shape my own future. Ethan made sure I understood that. He didn't treat me like a charity case, he treated me like an equal. It wasn't always easy. There were days when I wanted to run back to the familiar, back to the life I knew, even if it was painful. But Ethan was always there, gently reminding me that my past didn't have to define me. He showed me what it was like to live without fear, to trust, to love. I still had my doubts, though. Could I really live this new life? Could I ever feel truly free? But as time passed, something shifted within me. I began to feel a warmth in my chest when I looked at Ethan, something more than gratitude, something deeper, something real. It wasn't just that he had saved me from my past. It was that he had given me a chance to rebuild my life, to choose my own path. And with each passing day, I found myself wanting that future more than anything. It was a slow, steady change, but it was happening. I was changing. And so was Ethan. He wasn't just the man who had saved me from my past, he had become a part of my future. And though we hadn't yet named what was growing between us, I knew that whatever it was something that neither of us could ignore. I still remember the first time I truly felt free. It wasn't a grand moment, no dramatic speech or sudden rush of emotions. It was a quiet moment, in the kitchen, when I made a decision. On my own for the first time. Ethan had asked if I wanted to help prepare dinner, and for the first time, I said yes, without hesitation, without the fear of being judged or the burden of obligation. It was a simple thing, but to me, it was monumental. For the first time, I was making a choice that wasn't dictated by anyone else. As I chopped vegetables, I realized that I was no longer trapped by my past. I had my own future now, a future that didn't include being told what to do every moment of my life. The days that followed felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly falling into place. Ethan continued to be patient with me, never rushing me, but always there when I needed him. He guided me when I was unsure, but he never forced me to be something I wasn't ready to be. And as time passed, I began to grow more comfortable with myself, with the idea that I could live without fear, without shame. Ethan and I started to spend more time together, not because he felt obligated, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I began to see him differently, too, not just as the man who had freed me, but as someone who truly cared about me. He listened when I spoke, and he respected my thoughts, even when they didn't always make sense. There were moments, in the quiet of the evenings, when we would sit together in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls. We didn't always talk, sometimes, it was just enough to be in each other's presence. But there was an understanding between us, an unspoken bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. I had never known love like this before. It wasn't the kind of love I had seen in stories or heard about from others. It wasn't grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was real. It was patient, kind, and understanding. It was a love that allowed me to be myself, to grow at my own pace, without any pressure or expectation. And yet, it was undeniable. The more time we spent together, the more I realized that my feelings for Ethan were changing. He was no longer just the man who had saved me, he had become someone I could see spending the rest of my life with. But the thought scared me. Could I really love someone, after everything I had been through? Could I trust myself to open my heart fully to someone again? These questions haunted me, but each time I looked at Ethan, I felt something shift inside of me. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't demanding my love or my commitment. He was just there, offering me the space and time to figure things out. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I was worthy of that kind of love. I was worthy of someone who cared for me not because of what I could do for them, but because of who I was. I wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time, I was no longer afraid of the unknown. I had found someone who would walk beside me, no matter where that path took us. I had begun to see the world through different eyes, and for the first time, I realized how much I had been missing. Everything seemed new to me, even the smallest details. The way the sunlight filtered through the windows in the morning, the quiet hum of the world outside, the feeling of the grass beneath my feet, it was all so overwhelming, but also beautiful. It was as though I had been living in black and white for so long, and now the world was in color. But along with this new sense of freedom, I felt a deep sense of uncertainty. Could I truly fit into this new life? Could I ever be the person I wanted to be, free from the shadows of my past? There were days when the weight of it all seemed too much to bear. I was no longer a slave, but I wasn't sure what I was now. The life I had known for so long felt like a distant memory, something I could never return to, even if I wanted to. And yet, the future felt just as uncertain. I found myself questioning everything, who I was, who I could be, and whether I was strong enough to live this new life. But Ethan never wavered. He was there for me, always patient, always understanding. He didn't push me to become someone I wasn't ready to be. He simply allowed me to take my time, to find my own way. There were moments when I would catch him watching me, his gaze soft and full of concern, and I realized just how deeply he cared for me. His presence was a constant comfort, a steady anchor in the storm of emotions I was navigating. I wasn't alone. I wasn't just a woman he had freed from captivity, I was a woman he genuinely loved. And though I hadn't yet fully come to terms with the depth of my feelings for him, I knew deep down that I cared for him more than I had ever cared for anyone before. There were no grand declarations between us, no sweeping gestures. It wasn't the kind of love that you read about in books or see in movies. It was quieter, more real. It was the kind of love that grew from understanding, from trust, from the simple moments we shared together. One evening, as we sat together in front of the fireplace, I found myself looking at Ethan in a way I hadn't before. He wasn't just the man who had saved me, he was the man who had given me a chance to rebuild my life. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just free from the chains that had bound me physically. I was free from the chains that had held me back emotionally, the ones that had made me doubt myself for so long. Ethan had helped me see that I was worthy of love, of happiness, of a future. It wasn't an easy realization to come to, but it was one that changed everything. For the first time, I felt truly free, free to love, free to live, free to be who I was meant to be. And as I sat there with Ethan, the firelight flickering between us, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. I didn't expect things to change overnight. The path I was walking on felt fragile, like it could slip away at any moment. But it didn't. With each day, I found myself growing stronger. I started to trust in the life Ethan and I were building together. It wasn't perfect, there were moments of doubt, of fear that I was still not worthy of this freedom, of the future we were crafting, but they were just moments. More and more, I saw the truth in Ethan's belief in me. And I started to believe in myself, too. There was one particular evening that stands out, a night when everything shifted for me. Ethan had been out of the house for most of the day, handling some business matters. It was just me in the quiet house, something I hadn't fully adjusted to yet. The silence wasn't suffocating, but it wasn't comforting either. It was just new. As I sat there, thinking about everything that had happened since Ethan had brought me here, I realized how much my life had changed in such a short time. I wasn't the same person who had been trapped in that dark world. I wasn't even the same person who had first stepped into this house, unsure of who I was or what I could become. I was different. But as I thought about the future, I felt the familiar weight of uncertainty creeping in. What was I supposed to do now? What kind of life was I meant to lead? I didn't have all the answers, and maybe I never would, but I knew one thing for sure, I didn't have to do it alone. When Ethan came home that evening, I could see something in his eyes. He was different too. The man I had come to know had always been strong, steady, but there was a vulnerability in him now, a quiet understanding that spoke volumes. He didn't ask me what was wrong, he didn't push me to talk. He simply sat down beside me and took my hand in his, as though to remind me that I wasn't alone. "We don't have to have everything figured out," he said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. "We just have to take it one step at a time." And in that moment, I realized that he was right. We didn't need to know exactly where we were headed. All we needed was each other, and the understanding that, together, we could face whatever the future held. The weight that had been pressing down on me, the fear, the uncertainty, lifted just a little bit. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from everything being perfect. It was the peace that came from knowing I wasn't alone anymore, that I had a partner in this journey. And as I looked into Ethan's eyes, I knew that no matter where life took us, we would walk it together. That was enough. It had to be enough. I had started to find my rhythm in this new life. The days blended together, each one feeling more comfortable than the last. But it wasn't just the routine that was changing. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite put into words. I was beginning to trust myself. I was beginning to believe that I could make decisions for myself, that I could live without fear of making a mistake. The thought alone was terrifying and liberating all at once. It was a small thing, the confidence to choose the smallest details, like what I wanted for breakfast or what I felt like wearing. But it was a powerful thing, too. It reminded me that I was more than what I had been, more than the person I had been forced to become. I was becoming someone new, and that person wasn't defined by the past. I had Ethan to thank for that, more than he probably realized. He didn't just give me freedom, he gave me space. Space to grow, to stumble, to figure things out at my own pace. He never rushed me, never pushed me into something I wasn't ready for. And most importantly, he never judged me. He accepted me as I was, flawed, unsure, but trying. And that was all I needed. It wasn't always easy. There were still days when I felt like an outsider, still days when the weight of my past would creep in, pulling me back into the shadows. But those days were becoming fewer and farther between. More often than not, I found myself looking forward to the future, even if I didn't know exactly what it held. And through it all, there was Ethan, steady, patient, always there. I didn't realize how much I had come to depend on him until one evening when he was late coming home. It was the first time in a long while that I felt that old anxiety creeping in, that feeling of being alone. It wasn't just the house that seemed quiet, it was me. The emptiness I had felt before wasn't gone. It had simply changed. I didn't want to go back to the way things had been, but I also didn't want to feel lost. Without him, I wasn't sure what was worse, being trapped by my past or feeling vulnerable in the present. But when Ethan finally returned that evening, the look in his eyes, the quiet way he reached for my hand, let me know that I wasn't alone. He didn't have to say anything, his presence was enough. It was enough to remind me that I was safe. That I was wanted. That I belonged here, with him. And I realized that I had come so far. I had learned to trust him, to trust myself, and to trust the future we were building together. We didn't need to have everything figured out. We didn't need to know what tomorrow would bring. All we needed was the knowledge that, no matter what, we had each other. And that was enough. I had started to feel something different, something real, and yet I found myself unsure of what it meant. The uncertainty was always there, lingering just beneath the surface, and sometimes it felt like it might overwhelm me. But, as with everything, time had a way of easing the weight. As the days passed, I learned how to live with that uncertainty, how to let it be part of who I was, without letting it control me. And every day with Ethan helped me understand that not having all the answers was okay. There was no perfect way to move forward. We were both learning together. Even though things felt right between us, there were moments when I still questioned myself, questioning whether I was enough, whether I deserved the life I now had. But Ethan never wavered. He never made me feel less than, and slowly, I began to see myself through his eyes. I wasn't broken, I wasn't damaged beyond repair. I was a person who had been through pain, yes, but I was still whole. Still capable of love. That realization was huge for me. It allowed me to open up to the possibilities of the future, to the idea of truly being happy, not just surviving. But as much as I was healing, there were moments when the ghosts of my past would come back. The fears I had buried would surface at the most unexpected times. I could still remember the heaviness of the chains, the way they dug into my skin and the hollow feeling they left in my chest. Those memories were impossible to escape, but they didn't define me anymore. They were a part of my story, yes, but they didn't have to control the rest of it. One evening, as I was lost in my thoughts, Ethan walked in, his presence calming the restless energy inside me. I could see in his face that he was concerned, but when he sat next to me and took my hand, I realized that this was a moment I needed. I needed him. More than anything, I needed to stop holding back, to stop letting my fear dictate my future. "I'm here," he said softly, as if the words alone could reassure me. And in that moment, I realized something: I had already come so far. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first arrived here. I had learned to trust again, not just Ethan, but myself. I had opened up to a new way of living, a new way of loving, and even though there were still some shadows from my past, they didn't scare me the way they used to. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to be perfect. All I needed was the courage to keep moving forward, one step at a time, with Ethan by my side. Together, we could face whatever came our way. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, they would always be there in some form. But so would Ethan. And that was enough for me. I had never imagined that life could feel so full, so complete. The days had become something I looked forward to, not something I endured. For so long, I had been used to living in the shadows, never really having a say in my own life. But now, the sun seemed brighter, and the world had become a place of possibility. It was still a journey, of course. There were still moments when I felt like I didn't quite belong, when the weight of my past seemed too heavy to carry. But there were more moments of peace now, more moments of joy. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about living. Ethan had shown me what it meant to truly live, to embrace life with open arms. He had given me the space to grow, to become the person I had always been capable of being. Even if I didn't know it at the time. Every step I took forward felt like a victory, even the small ones. And I began to see something else, something I hadn't fully understood before: my past didn't have to define my future. It was a part of me, yes, but it wasn't all of me. The woman I was becoming was not the same as the woman I had been. And that was okay. Ethan had become a constant in my life, a source of strength and stability. But he also taught me something crucial: that I was capable of standing on my own, too. He never made me feel dependent on him, but instead, he encouraged me to stand tall beside him, to build a future together. The thought of that future, of a life built on trust, understanding, and love, was both exciting and daunting. But I was ready. I had to be. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized just how far we had come. There was a quiet contentment between us, a mutual understanding that didn't need words. It was enough just to be together. I had never known peace like this before. And for the first time, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never experienced. It wasn't because of what Ethan had given me. It was because I had found a place where I felt safe, where I felt loved, where I felt like I mattered. Ethan and I had both changed in ways we never could have imagined. But what mattered most was that we had found each other in the process. And as the last light of the day faded, I felt a sense of certainty that, whatever came next, we would face it together. Our journey wasn't over, but I no longer feared what the future might hold. With Ethan by my side, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. We were ready, together. I had started to understand something important about myself, something I had never fully grasped before. The idea that my past didn't have to be a burden that I carried forever was liberating. It didn't define who I was, not anymore. The woman I was now was not bound by the chains that had once held me, not by the fear that had controlled my every move. I was free, truly free, for the first time in my life. And for the first time in my life, I believed I deserved that freedom. Ethan had helped me see that. He had given me the opportunity to live, to experience the world as I had never been able to before. And now, I found myself looking ahead with a sense of hope, something I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. We had come so far together, and the journey ahead was no longer something I feared. It was something I was eager to embrace. Our days had a quiet rhythm now, a kind of peace I had never known. There was no rushing, no fear of the future. We were building something real, something lasting, and it didn't have to be perfect. It was ours. And every day, I found myself falling more and more in love with the life we were creating. The simple moments meant the most. The way Ethan would smile when he caught my eye across the room. The way he would always reach for my hand when we walked together. These were the moments that told me everything I needed to know. We didn't have to talk about our feelings constantly. We didn't need grand gestures. What we had was real, and it was built on trust, on understanding, on the quiet knowledge that we were there for each other, always. But there was something else that had started to bloom inside me, something I hadn't expected. As I grew into this new version of myself, I began to realize that my life with Ethan wasn't just about him rescuing me from the past. It was about building a future together, as equals. He didn't want me to be dependent on him. He wanted me to stand beside him, not beneath him. And that made all the difference. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could stand tall, like I could be someone who mattered, not just to Ethan, but to myself. I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by who I had become. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized how incredible it was. Ethan wasn't just my partner. He was my equal. We were building something together, and that felt more powerful than anything I had ever known. I had found something I hadn't thought possible, a life of my own, a life filled with love, trust, and the promise of something even more. And as we stood together on the porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had a whole lifetime ahead of us, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take us. Together.